to be here today with my longtime friends, Barry Alexander, Cosmo Buono, and my newfound friends, Karen Beluso and Timothy Blair. I have just tremendous amount of respect for them. And I've been with them, working with them since many years ago, but more intensely since the pandemic. So I'm bringing everybody together here. I've included description along with this video to introduce a brand new program they have put together, brains from Steinway, Juilliard, and it's just so exciting. It's called the Pre-College Program from ABIA, Alexander Buono International Academy. So welcome, everybody. I'm so glad to be on this call with you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you for having us.
Absolutely. It's 5:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And I am so excited because I've seen all of you transform the way that you run your business. And it's not easy since March, right? April, I know Carnegie Hall closed down. And as a result, all of you put your brains together and immediately pivoted to online content. And so I just want to throw a question out there, maybe first to Barry and Cosmo. What triggered that thought? Like, what was going through your head to say, wow, everything we did in person, master classes, now they're online and we have to make that change? What was that transition like for you?
Well, part of it for me was just the whole idea of not wanting there to be a gap in the education. So many people had started serious study, and we run 4 competitions for piano, voice, strings, and flute. And in 3 of those competitions, there's an elementary division. And these children start very early, but they want to have this continuous pedagogy. So we didn't want the fact that people could not be in the same room together to be an impediment to their learning. That's why we decided to transition everything as quickly as possible to an online format so that education could be continued. That was my focus, and I'm sure Cosmo wants to add to that.
Well, I realized because I have students in Japan, California, Minnesota, that the technology can be used very effectively to teach. And so when the coronavirus hit and the pandemic became such an issue, we realized, as Barry has just said, we could continue this education and expand it to other people.
Mm-hmm. It's so incredible to hear you say that, because I must say that since I've integrated myself with this group, I have just tremendous amount of respect, not only for classical musicians and artists. I find myself in rooms where there is a piano and I literally started just playing. This happened very recently. I'm glad there was no audience. Thank you. And I just remember like a few notes from when I was 7 or 8 years old, and there's just so much excitement. And I think, as we talked about, art and music is precisely what people need these days to feel really alive and happy and feel like something that they still own. It's a skill that your students possess. And so I would love to ask a few questions about pre-college, because I've been doing some research for Juilliard and I look at some of the other music schools, conservatories, and everybody's offering online programs. So maybe this is a question first for Karen, Timothy, and Cosmo, in terms of why did you decide to create such program? How did you construct the curriculum? And it just really incredible from what I can see on the website.
Well, I think, we realized there was a need as the pandemic was continuing. So we knew that people, it's not yet possible to have lessons and participate in other musical activities yet safely. So we knew that we had to take this online, but it actually, and please, my colleagues jump in, it grew out of our institute.
Mm-hmm.
Because we saw what we were doing in our institute, which, for those of you who aren't aware, we had 2 summer institutes in July. Is it both in July or July and August, something like that, where they were 1-week sessions, and where we worked intensely with a group of young pianists, first elementary and intermediate, and then advanced students. And we realized what we were offering there could be offered as part of a pre-college program online to supplement students who are already taking lessons. Perhaps some may want to take lessons, but it's certainly a supplemental in that respect, to provide them with the music theory and the music history, that we found that we were also giving in our lessons just innately.
Mhm. Anything from you, Tim or Cosmo? Timothy.
Well, I think that what's important for everyone to know is that the Alexander Buono International Academy, at its core, wants to create the fully formed musician. That piano is an instrument, but ultimately we want to make music and we want to make musicians. One of the great advantages of the curriculum for pre-collegiate, if many students, if they decide they want to be a music major, they actually enter.
Try tapping above to edit.
Was that okay? I heard something in the background. It sounded like a munchkin.
Yes, exactly. Siri wants to sign somebody on to pre-college. I apologize.
Okay.
That's
Okay.
wonderful.
That's very good. This will be a test of my focus.
Say the very least, yes.
But most students, when they're applying to be a music major, they're very talented, very gifted, and they often are accepted based upon how well they play their instrument at the audition. But many have not had any training in sight singing, ear training, music history, background of any kind. So when they enter, they struggle because now they have to spend so much time on the ancillary coursework that they have less time to practice. The other type of student just pretends that all of the other things don't really exist, and they spend all of their time on what they really can do, which is play their instrument. And so when it comes to trying to be an A student, they struggle juggling all of these other components that often are not available in a studio lesson. So I think that that's something that is of extreme value for the student who wants to be a music major. And for those students who don't want to be music majors, they still should have a sampling of what really makes a holistic approach to music.
Wonderful. Thank you, Timothy. Cosmo, do you have anything else to add?
Well, we've described our approach as holistic, and we try to bring in all these elements of theory, of history, of culture, because composers don't live in a vacuum. They are influenced by historical events, by literature, by art. And it's important that the student understands this, because then when they're making a decision on how are they going to present a piece, what is the story they want to tell with the piece, how is their interpretation going to develop, it's dependent on all of these other things. It's not just playing the notes as well as possible. And this is a cultural background that we can give students, also a critical background that they can then make decisions based on a real knowledge, a real foundation, so that as a teacher, it's possible then to talk to a student about their interpretation rather than saying, well, you should do this, you should do that, you should do the other. And this is a way of engaging the student intellectually and emotionally into the work that they do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, wonderfully said. And I find it really interesting. For me, I'm new to all of this, and I noticed that the programs will be running on Saturdays. So, which means even if students are going to regular schools and they can still enjoy this. Was this designed intentionally for pre-college?
Mm-hmm. You mean the Saturday?
Yes,
element?
on Saturdays.
Yes, yes, absolutely. Recognizing that students would still be, whether or not they would be in a school building or not, they still have school Monday through Friday.
Wonderful. So I think it's fascinating because I grew up in Asia, and I think about that many of the children, many of my friends, except for myself, took music education very seriously because Many of them are going through different levels. We're taking lessons on a regular basis. But what I have learned from many of you is that even though you are all professional musicians and you're able to pass this art on to the next generation, you're very open about the different career paths that are available to people. I've heard literally like scientists, lawyers, attorneys, and artists of many kinds, many walks of life. Could you maybe speak to that a little bit, just so that parents, students are watching this, realize there may be other possibilities other than the concert pianist, for example?
Well, my personal experience is that often people who are doctors, lawyers, business people continue studying. In fact, there are competitions for amateur musicians, and they play very, very well and very seriously. And often they tell me that, it's so wonderful to come home and spend an hour or two practicing the piano and using another part of my brain and not having to do what I do all day long.
I would go back to what Dr. Beluso also said, which largely has to do with students who are not going to be music majors, that we keep bringing up critical analytical thinking. Well, something you do in every profession to be successful is multitasking, and you've got to be able to look at something, figure it out on your own, and not rely on people to tell you how to do things. And all of these are skills that are background skills that students are learning when they are studying piano or musical instrument. I have a friend who's very successful on Wall Street. He studied piano as a teenager. He learned the very skills we're talking about and has given a number of talks at my request to individuals about how important his piano instruction was for him. And then he took it to a higher level. When he hires people to work for him on Wall Street, he said it's simply not enough to have an MBA. You have to have people who are able to talk to clients. And he finds that if students who have studied music, in fact, are hired to do business, they're able to talk about cultural things. Mm-hmm. And so clients become engaged, and that's very helpful to everyone.
Absolutely. And, I think about you all talk about music education. I think there are also some misconceptions and also anxiety, as I've noticed among, Asian parents in particular. I hate to call any particular ethnicity out, but a lot of parents are thinking about, like, what do I need to know for my child to be entered into the best programs? And I know that that doesn't just start with college, but sometimes of the secondary schools as well. So maybe, Barry, I know you're also very passionate about music and learning and business in conjunction. So what's the take on helping parents and children to find the right schools for themselves with the very intricate application process? Is that something that ABIA will be offering to this community?
Absolutely, because that within itself is its own kind of industry. You have to understand that so much of the curriculum related to a certain school, or even just its location, can impact things very significantly. So we want to talk about the specific needs of the child, the student, and also what the parents' goals are in terms of placing them in one institution or another. Because ultimately what you want to have is the greatest opportunity for learning based on what the institution is and where it's located and what the child will basically be going for, and in terms of what they want to achieve in their own education. So all of these things require your partnering a lot of factors and pairing them together. And that has to be both discussed and thought out very carefully so that there are no surprises and there are also no disappointments. That's an extremely important aspect of it.
That's great.
Parents want success for their children, but a parent may decide that a son or daughter should go to school X, which, depending upon the makeup of their child, it may be the wrong choice for that child in terms of school. So placement is critical, but we also, as an academy, are thinking in terms of this child being successful once they have enrolled in the program. Getting in is one thing, and completing it is another thing.
Mm-hmm. And so you all speak a lot to the fact that, there's always there's our advantages versus disadvantages, people moving at different speeds, different learning speeds, different way of interpreting music. So I was wondering and curious if people are entered through this pre-college program, but if they need some additional help, can they get that, such as private lessons, consultations, and things like that?
Yes, we will offer that not just for private lessons, but also for the theory and the history
Mm-hmm.
and consultation. So, we hope to be, this one huge resource for both parent and student.
Yes,
Awesome.
that's right. The idea is to tailor this as much as we can to the specific needs of students so that they complete the program feeling as though they have as many tools at their disposal as possible to be successful within the next steps of their education. That's why we want to talk to them about what they need and where they feel as though they need to build up their strengths. That's going to be very important.
And you have
Neither of my parents were musicians. And when they discovered they had a child who was musically inclined, they were terrified because they didn't know who to go to talk to get any advice really about what's a good program, all of the criteria for me to be successful. So that's one of the major contributions that the International Academy that we have, we're prepared to make.
And one of the other things, and I just realized this, is that you have 3 different perspectives, for students and for parents, in terms of, you know, coming from the piano teacher, coming from a former school administrator, college administrator, teacher, performer, a parent.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So we're all able to look at this. I've had, over the years, numbers of conversations, with parents of students, assuring them in terms of, where their child's applying, what programs are best. How do we as a parent, um, how do we know we're making the right choice for our child?
Mhm. Mhm.
So I think, just even amongst the 3 of us, we were able to offer 3 perspectives from the same philosophy, though,
Mhm.
to a larger audience.
I think what's also super exciting in terms of a larger audience is the ability to now reach students in North America, and Europe, and Asia. And you have all very, so thoughtful in terms of when you teach. And I know that teaching on Zoom isn't always the easiest thing. So I have had the pleasure to be able to really stay involved throughout the process because I'm also trying to learn and figure things out. So one of the things I think a lot of people are thinking about is people think about how much time we're spending on Zoom. Needless to say that teaching on Zoom versus in person is very different, but to have access to, like yourself, Karen, who graduated from Juilliard 3, 4 times with different degrees, and Cosmo and Timothy being Steinway artists, and there are only so many of you in the world. Barry is renowned in terms of integrating art, music, and business together. So please, let's talk about teaching on Zoom. What excites you about teaching on Zoom, and perhaps what you find challenging at the same time?
I would say that when I first started, I found it rather daunting, and I was a little nervous about how much I could get across to a student with Zoom. And I'm delighted by the fact that there's a great deal that one can do. The technology has made it so simple. The sound quality is very good. We can position a camera so that I can see exactly what a student is doing, and we can talk about the physical aspects of playing the piano and how you have to hold your body and how you have to rest your body in between activity in playing the piano. And so I don't really find that there's anything lacking in a Zoom session.
Mhm.
I've found that my students take more responsibility because I'm not there to write in their notebooks. Now they have to write in it. They have to
Love it.
mark their music.
Yeah.
So now, they have to be prepared with a pencil, whereas I was the one writing it, and then, how many times I'd be like, how many times do I have to circle this? But now suddenly that responsibility is on them. I don't think, when we do return to in-person lessons, I don't think I'm ever going to write in their notebooks again.
That's great. Blessing in disguise. Yeah.
But other than, when they're really little and they're still learning to write. But, but with
Yeah.
my intermediate advanced kids, they're all doing it on their own.
Wow. I never thought about that. That is true.
Yeah, from numbering measures and everything,
Mhm.
because then we have a, frame of reference, because I can say, oh, look at measure 25. Well, I
Mhm.
wouldn't have done that when we were in person. I would have just gone over and pointed to it.
And something I noticed, Karen, with
Mhm.
our institute was one of the things that worried me is if you're not in a classroom situation, will students engage with each other? Well,
Oh my
they all did. They had recall.
From our littlest ones to our biggest ones, they
Right.
found a way.
Yeah, with the reactions and comments, I thought
They
the
were teaching
cutest.
us.
Yeah, that was the cutest thing. I loved it. It was like the kids trying not to teach Barry how to throw a reaction, and they were putting all the virtual backgrounds
Oh my
on the
gosh, yes.
screen. It was so much fun. That's one thing I can't believe, like watching my own cousins growing up playing the piano and watching the kids laugh with you and
Mhm.
teenagers laugh with you to
Yeah.
join in on conversations. You had, I remember the sessions on talking about school, talking about, anxiety as a musician, how to overcome them, stage fright and all that. It was just very holistic. I mean, I wish I wish my teacher were able to talk about things such as, how do you not lose yourself during an exam? What's the point of preparing for all those years and not be able to perform in public? But well, speaking of which, the students now and have repeatedly, because of ABIA, have a stage here on Zoom through
Mhm.
webinars where parents, families, and friends are getting these links. And I've witnessed that you've hosted all these webinars, concerts with 80, 100 people or more attending. I get very excited. How do you feel about that?
Well, I want to say just one last thing about teaching online, because many teachers were in fact finding it daunting. I discovered that I didn't realize how much I demonstrate when I teach, and which requires a second camera on the piano so that I can point it at my hands, because I spend a lot of time with students repairing their technical approaches.
Mhm.
So they have to be able to see what I'm doing, and I have to be able to see what they're doing. But it does work, because as long as you can see, you can demonstrate.
Mhm. And I love the fact that, this is something that I kind of my expertise will come into play, where I love having conversations with you to talk about the position of the camera, how to make real, original sound come through. We have different videos created. And I think creatively it was very challenging for me, but really enabled me to learn so much more about Zoom, about microphone, lighting, positioning. So that's wonderful. So as a reminder for people who are still watching towards the end, there is an info session to be able to connect with everybody here on screen on September 24th at 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And on the website, alexanderbuono.org/pre-college, there's a registration link. And I love this group so much because I really have never seen music taught this way. And, I have not put many other musicians on live stream just yet, but I really would love for kids and young musicians from around the world to be able to take advantage of this, to join in on a conversation. So thank you so much for that, for having this conversation with me today.
Thank you for having
Thank
us,
you.
Faye.
Thank you
Thank
very
you.
much, Ray. Thank you.
Yay.